So the flip side of the younger and weak performing firms is the older and high performing firms. So what we actually argue here that having this concentration of industry experience can produce myopia effects. And I think maybe that connects with that argument. The older firms, they're clearly not as vulnerable to liability of newness. I mean, they typically accumulate resources. They have some slack. They have established business ties and reputation. And then also, over time, we do see some strategic persistence in these companies in the sense that, I mean, they're developing their routines, operational procedures, but probably even more importantly, mindsets, right? Mindsets about what the company is about, what strategic directions are and should be. So those are the kind of things that actually are really difficult to change. And that wouldn't be a problem if the environment wasn't changing, but we're talking about a high technology, dynamic, highly competitive environment. So that's when actually that kind of concentration of that type of knowledge might actually be detrimental. And I think related to this, those firms that are also performing well, what we also know from the micro literature is that managers tend to be highly confident. Sometimes complacency, like we have demonstrated the strategy is clearly working. We're doing well. Why change the strategy? So those are so seemingly strong-looking organizations may actually be more prone to this type of myopia when we have the concentration of industry expertise. Primarily, it's entrenchment in industry norms and practices. So even though there are benefits of industry, we're not saying that industry experience doesn't matter or is no good, but what we're saying, yes, there are some benefits, but it may be creating a lot of cohesiveness, and because of these attributes, if they're more prone to complacency and overconfidence, we may end up with a situation where there's a lot less questioning for industry recipes. So we argue that actually this combination is going to end up increase IPO underpricing. So I can actually now move to results. Just a little bit on the sample. These are biotech companies. They went public between 1995 and 2010. And I mentioned some of the variables. IPO underpricing is the percentage gap between the offer price and the first day closing price. And all the experience variables is board experiences, average number of public company boards served in the past or currently. Educational background, proportion of directors who have bachelor's or above college degree in science. And the final one is average years of experience in the biotech industry. And we have control variables. Some of our finance controls, underwriter rank, risk of offering IPO proceeds. Some are governance controls. Insiders ratio, board size, board tenure, some equity ownership, and also have some general controls like firm age, year dummies, and so on. We did an OLS regression because we're looking at a stretch of time, but it's like one observation at one point. And so they go public. We had a snapshot of the company, the bios, and so on. So, and we did some specifications.
You didn't control even if the firm has been rated by a credit agency or not, right?
No. Would that have been an important?
Can be from the literature.
Okay. And
not the bonus of the credit, but either or not.
Honestly, I don't even know if at that size and like before they go public, do they even get?
They don't have to, but if they get, it can affect.
Okay. I wouldn't have even thought about that. Okay, so that's something to look at. All right. So just to quickly mention here, so we didn't hypothesize any main effects, but of course, the way we test them, control variables, main effects, and then the interaction effects. We hypothesize the interaction effects. So these are the results with respect to main effects. I'm probably not going to go through these too much because we haven't hypothesized them, but they are consistent with the theory that we have been presenting. But I'm going to go to the individual hypothesis. So the first one was the cumulative public board experience And if you remember, this was the director and the CEO being able to work together because both parties have served on public company boards. So this was supported, and actually I'm going to show the picture. I think it's a little easier. So this is IPO underpricing, and typically it's like lines going down means it's being reduced. It's a good thing for the lines to go down. What we see here is that the line is not only going down as directors' cumulative public board experience increases. I mean, these are real numbers, 6 board, 7 board. But it increases in a faster fashion when the CEO's cumulative public board experience is high. And what that means is 1 standard deviation above the average. 1 standard deviation above, 1 standard deviation below the average. That's kind of how these two lines are plotted. I think what I wanted to quickly point out here is that, so it's statistically significant, but also I think it was like, I was also amazed that it's a pretty significant reduction. This is the whole data range, of course. Remember I mentioned the average IPO underpricing is about 13%. So it's a pretty significant drop, within the data range. So it's an important predictor, it turns out that.
If you could add one more dimension, say size of the company, like turnover, to this chart, a third dimension, how would it look like? Could it be the case that the intercorrelation between size of the company and the years, because of that result, actually we're canceling out the effect of the size of the company in this chart? Maybe because the company is large, that's why we have cumulative public board experience, and that's why we haven't that sort of gap.
It's possible. I think I can't say, without testing it, I don't know if I could say it would or it wouldn't. It's possible. It's possible. I think that would be something. And I think firm size is not, we should have control for that. I think it's not in the control variables, because that question came up before. We have the firm age. They correlate, but it's not the same thing. So that's a good question. That's a good question. But I think then the question would be, what's driving the result, right? Is it the size that's giving the comfort, or is it the individual, Because I think you can still, the best thing would be to control the size, right? Then you can rule that out. Because even if you have two companies at the same size, they may have different expertise profile in their board. They may have more expertise in the board than smaller firms. Actually, that may not work.
I mean, I don't know about your sample size. It is 132, if I'm not mistaken. 260. 360. So 360 is quite nice for a chi-square analysis if you have like two different sizes of companies.
Yeah, we can look at it. We can look at it.
Maybe the difference could be significant, and that would probably a little bit lessen the effect of dramatic results.
I mean, one can look at it as a three-way interaction, or split the sample and see what happens to these. Does it go away, or does it bigger, lesser?
Maybe you could do a multi-level regression, perhaps. I don't know.
That's a good suggestion.
You have both the variables and the interaction, right, for each hypothesis?
Yes.
And you produce these graphs using the interaction variables only?
Yes.
Can you explain how you constructed this graph in more detail?
Yes. So, I said interaction only, but it actually, so, let's see if I'm going to
You had only interaction in the regressions?
No. The main variables are there. So, so the graphs are done on these particular, regressions. So this includes both. So this is the control variables, and these are the main variables, and here's your interaction. So you put the average value of all variables, and you use the coefficients, so you kind of get that one value. And then on top of that, you're actually using both because they both vary. You use both this, but also the specific main variables that you're testing. So you plug in different values and then end up with these two things. But I think for one variable, you kind of have to keep it constant in the sense that one standard deviation about one standard.
So you don't have anything that controls for cross-board membership, right?
What do you mean by that? Is that
Like company CEO is a board member in company
and board
B.
interlocks
Yeah.
kind of a thing? No, we didn't quite collect that data, partly because it wasn't set up as a network study. How common is that? Again, I think because of those rivalry issues that I've described, I don't expect it to be very common, but neither would I rule it out.
Because these are IPO companies,
Yeah.
before a company went public, it may be the case that CEO was actually working in the other company somewhere at the top management, and then he was transferred as a CEO, and his former boss is now in the board of this new company that is offered to the public. So it may have a totally
An
different
effect.
dynamics.
It
Yeah.
might.
Instead of these like social positive and negative interactions, it may be some conflict of interest.
Is this data hand collected or something?
Pretty much. I mean, you have these short bios, that they give you their expertise and experience history. It can mention some of these things. It may or it may not mention. I think, it also depends. I think to what detail they want it to, because that is a little bit of a red flag. So would they want to include that in the prospectus? I think if you were the CEO of the rival company, you were a CEO position. But if it was a lesser position, it may be mentioned, it may not be. The other thing is also, unless we specifically look into it, he may or may not realize they're direct competitors, sometimes. So that's a pretty, interesting point.
Actually, maybe if you find some other measure of performance of the top management, like instead of IPO underpricing, you find something else, and then do the same analysis with firms that have been public for a long time, and if you find similar results, then your results would be much stronger. They would be more meaningful.
And because?
Because around the IPO, as you said, we don't know what have happened in these companies, how the CEO was hired, etc. So because IPO is a very big thing.